the answer was really interesting. There was a study, and there was some researchers wanting to study a particular type of monkey in the rainforest, and they realised that the monkeys were all up in the trees, way too high for them to catch. And they'd tried nets, and they'd tried kind of cages, and they'd tried pits, and they would try and put like bananas or nuts or some sort of food near where they wanted to catch them. And every time that the monkey got close, well, remember the monkeys are watching. The monkeys got close. As soon as they got near the net kind of got to the point they'd gone. Every time they got near a pit, they would manage to get in and out of the pit before anybody could catch them. And it just wasn't working. And the researchers spent weeks and weeks and weeks trying to work out how on earth they were going to catch these monkeys that they wanted to weigh and measure and put electronic tags on so they could research where they went. And they were just about to give up when one of the helpers, one of the people that essentially were carrying all the kit into the rainforest with them, a local, kind of just stopped everybody. Didn't really have the same language as them, but kind of got so frustrated with them. He just walked over to a pile of kit, and he picked up a banana and essentially that wicker basket thing. And the important thing is it's got a very narrow top. And all he did was lay that, if you actually look, it's got no base at all. You couldn't catch anything with it in a normal way. But all he did, he just put it on the ground, and all the monkeys were watching him, and he just put a banana inside the top. And then they all backed away. And he just waited. And the monkeys came down, and they came down, and the monkey put his arm straight into the neck of the wicker basket, grabbed the banana, and tried to go. But now his arm's stuck, can't move anywhere. And as they got closer, normal people, human beings, what would you do? Drop the banana and run. To a monkey, banana is gold. Banana is food. Monkeys won't let go of the banana. So the guy just literally walked over, picked the monkey up, didn't even bother with the cage, and off they went. And they did that time and time and time again. He was surrounded by experts. He was surrounded by wise people in their field, but they couldn't catch a monkey. So what I wanted to think about this morning was wisdom. Sometimes we think people are wise because of the position they're put in or the situation they live in. I know at the moment we've had so many rules, regulations, things told that we've got to do. But if you notice, most of the time it was never by the people either side in the press conference who were the experts. It was by the one in the middle who had been told what the experts knew. So sometimes we need to be careful where we look for advice. It can be, somebody else can tell you, but it's important you know where the advice comes from. If you think through these days, where do we get our advice from? In the mission, we have visits from agencies like Citizens Advice and other places who give people advice. If I tried to do that, if I just set up a banner and sat somewhere and said, "Come on, I'll give you advice," I've got no expertise, I've got no training, I've got no understanding of maybe what they need. So we have to be careful where the advice comes from. Back in the 80s and 90s, we went through a period of buying self-help books. Remember, you could think yourself thin, you could think yourself rich, you could think yourself anything if you bought this book. All you thought yourself was that you'd got a pile of books that told you what to do and you never did any of it. I can remember back in the 80s and 90s, people signing up for the Which magazine as well, because that would give you the best vacuum cleaner, which is the best vacuum, which is the best photocopier, which is the best place to go on holiday. And actually, a lot of the time, we just don't always know, because sometimes the advice you need is specific to you. And I just want to think about a little bit about the book of Proverbs. I don't think we use the book of Proverbs a great deal in the Bible, but I just wanted to have a quick look. And I'm all going to read. It's one of the few books that states what it's there for. You know, lots of books of the Bible kind of start with, this is from Paul, or this is from Timothy. It doesn't really tell you why it's created. But actually, if you look at the beginning of the book of Proverbs, it tells you there's a purpose and a theme. Let's often look at fire extinguishers. So literally the first 7 verses of Proverbs says, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behaviour, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance, for understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So it's quite clear what it's there for. It's the original self-help book. If you use the book of Proverbs, it should give you wisdom. But actually, what is wisdom? And why do we need to be wise? Actually, we all seem to have some form of knowledge. Whether we went to school for a week, a year, the whole time, whether we did PhDs, master's degrees and such like, we all have different degrees of knowledge. But actually, knowledge isn't always wise, as we found out with the monkey story. You know, they were all very, very clever, but they couldn't catch the monkey. I doubt the guy that caught the monkey had had a lot of education in the school. And so sometimes wisdom trumps knowledge. As I say, Proverbs is a book to give us wisdom. It talks about wisdom, and it's split into 3 sections, which I didn't realise. The first part is written for the young. It's written so that the young may gain wisdom. The middle section is to all of us, and the end section is specifically written for leaders and rulers. So obviously we've just read the little tiny bit at the beginning before it really gets going. But it's to direct us, it's to tell us the right direction to take, and if we're troubled, how we can use wisdom to help us through. As anybody knows that's read any of the book of Proverbs, it tends to be cut into tiny little snippets. It's a tiny bit of advice to kind of guide you on your way. And it always makes me think of when you've got small children. You know, that period in their growing when why is their favourite word. You know, you give an answer and they go, why? And you give another answer and they answer, why? And so sometimes the book of Proverbs is like those snippets of us going, why would we do that? And the book of Proverbs tends to have an answer. So can we become wise by simply reading the book of Proverbs? Chapter 1, verse 7 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I don't think it's fear as in being terrified of God. I think it's being in awe of God, in being recognizing that God is bigger than all of us, he's wiser than all of us. And actually, if we listen to him, if we put our life in his hands and let him guide us, then we'll learn to catch the monkey, if you know what I mean. A few years ago, I heard of a story of a bank robbery in America. And it was the normal scenario you might see on a TV show in America where they're all standing, you know, the teller is at the bank, the hole, about to serve somebody, the guy comes up and pulls the gun out. Give us all your money, give us this, give us that. And he's getting more and more aggressive, more and more threatening. And the lady who was the bank teller started to pray. But she didn't pray for her. She prayed for wisdom as to how she could help this poor man. And by the end of her prayer, which went on for quite a while from what I can gather, the guy broke down in tears, gave her the gun, and gave himself up to the police. Because actually what he needed was a listening ear, a kind heart. He was in a desperate situation, and we all make silly choices, don't we, sometimes when we're desperate. And he was desperate. And it would have been so easy for that lady to just give him money, or to run, or to refuse, or to pray, please don't kill me. But something spoke to her, and I think it was the wisdom of God that spoke to her and said, pray for him, pray verbally for him so he can hear you. And apparently he was shouting, don't pray for me, don't pray for me. But she just kept praying. And as I say, he stopped, he burst into tears, he gave the gun, and he was taken away, and he was helped. So sometimes wisdom beats knowledge. Sometimes we can be wise but be foolish. We're not going to talk about anything that's been going on in the press recently, but we trust a lot of the people that are making stupid decisions at the minute are wise people. We can always get it wrong because it comes down to judgment, our own judgment about what is good and what is bad. We can learn to be wise, but we also need to learn how to use that wisdom. Many, many years ago, you may remember, there was a character, Harry Enfield, the comedian and impersonator, used to have a character who played kind of a granddad. I don't know if you remember him, and his catchphrase was, "You don't want to do it like that." And whatever anybody did, he would tell you were getting it wrong and how to better do it. But actually, the wisdom in Proverbs doesn't say, don't do it like that. It just says, why don't you think about doing it like this? Proverbs 3, verse 5 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all ways acknowledge him, God, and he will make your path straight. We can't do it on our own. I truly believe if the local guy in the rainforest hadn't turned up, they might still be trying to catch the monkey today. But actually, they trusted in somebody who knew better. And if we trust in God, our understanding becomes clearer. A few years ago, I saw, I get lots of papers sent to me, lots of things they think I should be reading. And if I'm honest, most of them I don't. But I did see one about a strategy for effective living. I thought, this is the ultimate self-help. This is it. This is the way forward. And it was really good, actually. It said that with that effective living begins with God's wisdom. I thought, okay, you get that? So it's respecting and appreciating who God is and kind of having reverence and awe for the fact that God is bigger than everything. But it then requires moral and practical application. So it's okay to begin with God's wisdom and gaining it for ourselves, but we need to then kind of put it through a filter, us through a filter of what is moral and what is practical in our situation. And that would result in effective living. So it's experiencing what God will do in our lives if we're obedient to his teaching. And I thought that sounds really, really good. But what if we get it wrong? I don't know about you, but I'm kind of thankful IKEA's gone from Coventry. I'm kind of, I know we like IKEA, so they get too upset. I do like IKEA, but every time I went to IKEA, it left me with a headache because I knew I was going to have to put something together with some instructions I didn't understand. The first time Andy and I ever went to IKEA back when it was in Birmingham, we did that thing which most people who visited IKEA at that time did, and that was buy some of those bouncy chairs. You know, the ones that you sit on that they feel like a trampoline. And there was only the two of us at the time before the children, and we bought this chair, we took it home, it was all flat packed. We were like, yes, we've come all the way back from IKEA, 30 odd miles, wherever it is, and we're going to put it back together. And I'm sitting in the lounge with all these pieces everywhere. Eventually I open the instructions, being a man, don't need instructions. I open the instructions and I'm putting it together. And I just kept going, I don't understand what's going wrong. It was only after probably a couple of hours and on this help that I realized instead of having a left leg and a right leg, we've got two left legs. So actually, I thought I was getting it wrong, but actually the situation was wrong. And we had to go all the way back to IKEA and take it back and get another one and come all the way back again. Eventually, I looked at the instructions. Eventually, I bit the bullet. It's like, sometimes you get lost. And, I can remember my dad. Dad, are we lost? When you go, do you know where you're going? Yes, fine. And eventually you do go, Mary, get the map out. But he'd never think of looking before. Sometimes we think before we actually do something positive about it. And so actually don't do what we do when we go to IKEA. It says in James 1:5, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God. So I encourage you that actually don't be like my dad when he was driving around. Don't be like the experts in the rainforest. Actually seek out wisdom through God. I think I'm going to stop there, otherwise we're going to go on forever. one more story. Back in the day, many of you know that before I worked here, I worked for somebody who talked about Jesus as a profession. He was an evangelist. He used to go around the country and around parts of the world. And one of the places we went to was a place called Bourne in Lincolnshire, tiny little place. And we worked with about 7 or 8 churches in the area. And we had a great time. And one of the things we organised was that on every day from Monday to Friday, one of the churches would have a soup lunch and it would have a different talk every day. And it would be talks called apologetics. So it would be, is Jesus real? Why is the Bible important? All these different things. And on the first one, a bit like in a cafe like this, we all came together and the soup was handed out and everybody was laughing and chatting and eating their soup. And just before the talk, it was like one of those cowboy films where the saloon doors swing open. The doors opened and this little old fellow walks in, looking really grumpy. And the room all went and looked at this guy, and the chatter stopped. And as he went near people's chairs, they would pull their chairs in and let him come through. What on earth's going on? And he went to the counter and he got his soup and he went to a table on his own and he ate the soup and the talk would happen. And at the end of the talk, when everybody was just chatting, straight out the door again. Who on earth is that? And they were like, that's the local doctor. He is terrifying. He will shout at you in the street. He's a horrible person. They were really, really terrified of this man. And we're like, okay, well, see what happens tomorrow. Second day, soup comes out. Again, door swings open. This guy comes in. And again, they all, and he comes in, he gets his soup, he sits down. And this is a doctor. He's a wise man. He's a clever man. But he couldn't talk to anybody. And day 3 happened. Seemed to be the same. Day 4 happened. And day 4 was talking about suffering. Why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? Why do people suffer? And he came in and he looked just as grumpy. And at the end, he left. He didn't seem quite as grumpy on the way out. And then on day 5, he didn't come to the talk. I thought, oh, that's a bit strange. But then that evening, we'd got an evening service where we were going to have a service and people were going to be invited to give their life to Jesus. And right at the end of the talk, nobody noticed he was right at the back. And as people were being offered to come forward, if you want to give Jesus a chance to live in your heart, then come forward and we'll pray for you. And then right at the very end of the service, the same man walked down the aisle, knelt down, and gave his life to Jesus. And we found out months and months later, the reason he'd been so grumpy, the reason he'd been so angry with the world, is because he was a doctor and his wife, for decades, had had a disease he couldn't cure. And so he had all the wisdom, all the knowledge, but actually he needed a bit of Jesus as well. And by listening to those talks over that week, it softened the things that were hardened in his heart. And when he heard about suffering and actually got, our explanation of how suffering happens, he realized that it wasn't his fault. And so all of his wisdom of being a doctor, he felt he'd failed his wife. But actually, God changed his heart. And he became a Christian. And from then on, we went back a year later, and we saw the same guy walk in, and he'd be hugging people and shaking people's hands. Total transformation. So I just want to encourage you today that actually, sometimes we can think we're wise, we can be full of knowledge, but actually we need a bit of Jesus as well, just to help us on our way. And he can make all the difference.